Welcome back. We are going to be factoring trinomials with a greater than 1. Okay, so now we probably have seen this several times on our page. What exactly does that mean? Well, a, remember, is that coefficient before the square term in your quadratic here. So a greater than 1 means you're going to have a number that's not 1. So you're going to have a coefficient here. And this time, unlike what we saw last week, we're not going to be able to factor it out as a GCF. So moving along, let's see what's going to happen here with this guy. Okay. Let's remember the basics for factoring trinomials. The basic look came in two sets of parentheses like this. So we're going to start ourselves off so we kind of have some sort of a skeleton to work with. I also remember that when I came up with these first two numbers, I got them because when I multiply these two, it's going to be equal to this guy here. Well, this is 2x squared. So I'm already thinking I'm going to have an x in both of these places, x and x. That's how I get back to my x squared. Now I have to multiply to get 2. The only way to multiply to get 2 is 2 times 1. Doesn't matter where the 2 goes and where the 1 goes. I'm going to put the 2 first. It's just my natural thing. I'm not going to put a 1 here because it looks weird for me in front of an x. I'm going to leave it alone. The next thing I'm going to remember now that I have this set in stone is that I'm going to work on my 15. Well, 15, that's what I'm going to use to get my last two numbers when I multiply them. So if I multiply my last two numbers to get 15, my choices are 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. So these are my couple of choices, and then I'm going to remember that, so whatever happens here, I'm going to multiply my outers and my inners, multiply it out, and that's how I'm going to get this middle number of 11x. Remember that I have to add to get that middle number of 11x. And you know, the same rules follow. I'm multiplying to get a positive, and I'm adding to get a positive, so I know that my signs are plus and plus. So sometimes if you can put them in, that can help you. Make sure you can see the pluses. Good. Okay, so now, my numbers here are going to be 1 and 15. Maybe they're 3 and 5, but I'm going to start with 1 and 15. The method that we're going to use is guess and check. So I'm going to start with a 1 and a 15. And the thing is, it matters if they switch places because now you're multiplying times 2. So it looks like 2 choices, but it's really 4. So let's try. So if I multiply my outers, that gives me a 30x. Multiply my inners, 1x, and I am adding, and that's 31. And I want to get 11. That's not it. Maybe I'll switch them. Maybe this one will be 15, I'll just do it this way, and maybe this guy here will be the 1. Multiply my outers, that's 2x. Multiply my inners, 15x, 17, 11. Not going to do it. So not that. Let's try 3 and 5. So as I try my 3 and my 5, I multiply my outers, 10x, sorry. So that's 10x, multiply my inners, and that's 3x. And, well, that's not going to do it either because that's 13. So forget 3 and 5. Well, there's only one choice left. I have to swap my 5 and my 3, multiply my outers here, and that's going to give me 6x. I multiply my inners, 5x, and yeah, that combines to be my 11x, and that's it. That is how I'm going to factor it. I have my possibilities for my first term, and there's really only this one possibility, so this part was set in stone. And then I had to play with this, my factors of 15, and I finally came up with an answer. Let's try a second one. So I got this guy over here, and let's begin. Start yourself off. 2 sets of parentheses, and I'm starting with a 3x squared. So I know it's x and x. The only way to get 3 is 3 times 1, because it's prime. So that's it. That's what the beginning of my factors have to look like. One of them will start with a 3x. The other one will start with an x. There's no other way to multiply. We're not using fractions or anything. No other way to multiply to get 3x squared. Okay, so now we want to multiply these two numbers and get a negative 8. Well, let's see. So 8 is going to be 1 times 8 or 2 times 4. And I'm multiplying to get a negative. So one of these is positive and one is negative, and I don't know which. It matters because now our first term is different. I'm going to erase this just so this is bothering me. Okay. So now I don't know where my signs go. That's going to be the very last thing that I do. But remember, this minus here tells you that we have to subtract. So just remember, when we check our inners and our outers, just subtract. Okay, so now let's move on. Let's try. Guess and check. 1 and 8. Just dive right in and guess. Multiply your outers, 24. Multiply your inners, 2x, and we have to subtract. Sometimes I leave the x's out. Most of the time I leave the x's out because they just too much. 24 and 2, well, when I subtract those numbers, I get 22. Well, that's 22, so that's not it. Let's swap it out. Maybe that's the 8, and maybe this is the 1. Multiply, and that's going to give me 3. Multiply in here, that's 8. When I subtract, I get 5. Well, that's not a 5 either, so that's not it. So forget the 8 and the 1. It has to be the 2 and the 4. Let's see which goes where. That's the 2 and that's the 4. Multiply my outers and I get 12, my inners and I get 2, and when I subtract I get 10. Still no good. One choice left. So I'm going to write it nice and dark because it has to be a 4 and a 2. Multiply your outers and you get 6x. Multiply your inners and you get 4x. That's it. Because when I subtract these guys, I will get a 2x here. We're still missing our signs. So let's figure out what the story is with the signs. Well, that's a positive. So when I combine these guys, I need to have a positive. So that's the positive and that's the negative because 6 minus 4 gives you a positive 2. So now when I multiply to get this 6x, that has to give me a positive. So this times this, that's got to be a positive 2. 3 times 2 has to give you a positive 6. When you multiply to get the 4x, that's going to be, well, the x is already positive, so the 4 we'd better make negative. Because then we can multiply that to get the negative 4. And negative 4 times positive 2, that's how you get that 8. Let's try another one over here. Start yourselves off. 2 sets of parentheses. How am I going to multiply to get 5x squared? Because 5 is prime, write it in, 5x and x. Now I have to multiply to get 16 for these last two numbers. So that's 1 and 16, 2 times 8, and 4 and 4. Now, of course, I always start up here at the top with 1 and 60. You can check any of these if you have a good feeling about them. Then you can start at the bottom, work your way up. It doesn't matter. For our purposes, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. Now I'm multiplying to get a negative, so I have to have one of each sign. And again, I don't know which one gets the plus, which one gets the minus. It matters because there's a 5. So I'm going to worry about my signs last, but I am going to remember that I'm subtracting. Guess and check, dive right in. So here's 1 and 16. When I multiply here, I don't even have to do it. That's a gigantic number. And I'm going to be subtracting 1. There's no way I'm getting 16 from that, so I'm not going to bother going any further. What if I did 16 and 1? Well, let's see. 5 times, that's 5, and that's 16. And if I subtract, I get 11. This is no good. So forget that guy. Let's try 2 and 8. So if I do 2 and 8, my outers, that's 40. 40 minus 2. See, sometimes, most of the time, I'll be honest, I don't write this down. I just remember it in my head. And I'll do 40 minus 2. Well, 40 minus 2? Nope. So that's not it. Switch it. And I'm going to do the 8 and the 2. Let's see if we could do this in our heads. 10 minus 8. Well, 10 minus 8 is 2. Nope. That's not it. Well, at least the last one, 4 and 4, you can't swap them out. That's my winner, 4 and 4. Let's double check. This times this, I am going to write this one because we want to get those signs right. This times this, 4x, and when you subtract, we will get 16, but we want a negative 16. So negative goes with the larger, plus with the smaller. Well, how am I going to multiply to get a negative 20? 5 times 4 has to be negative. That's where your minus goes. The other one gets the plus because we have to multiply to get a negative 16, and that is factored. Moving on. Number 4. So here's our last one that we're going to be learning from. And I'm going to set myself up with 2 sets of parentheses. 12. Well, 12 is 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. So how do I know which one it is? Guess and check. It's the only thing. But here's the thing. I'm also a little bit reasonable. So we are always going to have a prime number somewhere in our problem, just for our purposes. Is it like that in real life? No. Sometimes there are other ones that are more difficult, but for us, we are going to work with ones that have a prime number. Our prime number didn't happen first. It happened first with all the other guys, right? Because you had a 3 and a 5. The first one had a 2. So we don't have the prime number in the front. Instead, we have it in the back. What times what is going to give you 1? Well, 1 times 1. So that's the number that I can set in stone. There will always be, for our purposes in class, something here in our final factor that we can set in stone, and in this case, it's the 1. Also remember, you're multiplying to get a positive 1. So these signs have to be the same. It's nice when they're the same because you can write them in. It doesn't matter which is plus, which is minus. It's the same. So I'm going to write it in, but they're not positive times a positive because when you combine, you get a negative. It's going to be negative times a negative. Okay. Now I'm guessing and checking in the front. Well, the x goes 1 in each, so I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm just going to play with my numbers. Let's see. If this is a 1 and this is a 12, well, here's this also. See this plus here? That's going to tell you that you're adding, right? So if that's a 1 and that's a 12, your outers, well, that's going to be a negative 1. Your inners, a negative 12. Well, that combines to negative 13. That's not it. If you switch your 1 and your 12, because they're both minus 1s in the end, it's exactly the same. So forget that. That's not it. Let's go with 2 and 6. Your outers is a negative 2x. Your inners is a negative 6x. And, oh yeah, look at that. That's how you get your negative 8x, and we are done. Have you checked this one first? Sometimes we get lucky. Sometimes it's the very first one that we check, and I love it when that happens, but that is it. That's your answer, and you can always FOIL to check it out. That's going to give you 12x squared. In the back, negative times a negative, that's your positive 1, and your outers and your inners will give you that negative 8x. Okay, try the other examples on your own, see how you do.